Though the update stopped, the milestones didn't come to pass, and gradually a quiet uneasiness replaced the hopeful quietness. Something started to stir in the minds of those who had been watching from a distance since Christine decided to remove her child from social media, not out of gossip, but out of genuine concern. She said, "You don't know him and you don't know God," with a strong and furious voice. "Who are you to judge the health, appearance, and voice of my child?" Then, after watching a live video on X, a doctor confirmed what many had started to fear, but were afraid to acknowledge. Developmental delays were real, and the reality could no longer be ignored without timely and targeted intervention. The tense situation only got worse when Blueface's mother immediately joined the argument, and the grim possibility that Christine's son might never find his voice actually hung in the air like a thundercloud, attributed her grandson's developmental challenges to Christine, suggesting that her bad parenting was the cause. Her charges did more than just stir things up. They completely turned a private dispute into a public spectacle. Christine posted a live feed of her baby's birth on Instagram, expressing her ecstatic welcome and calling him awesome. However, as time went on, that ideal of perfection started to appear more complex. Viewers noticed that his head was unusually still, his eyes were still, and his cry was harsh, almost animalistic, and had little in common with the soft cry of a newborn. Christine remained calm despite growing anxiety, dismissing doubt and assuring everyone that her son was doing well. But then a live video emerged that drastically changed the mood while desperately defending her Blueface tattoo, while her son's high-pitched screaming reverberated in the background. For many viewers, the unfiltered and unsettling moment popped up on the screen like static, confirming their long-standing suspicion that something wasn't adding up. But it was starting to look more like a pattern than a single unsettling incident. Then, another video appeared, which heightened the anxiety. Christine was feeding her 8-month-old son while holding a spoon to his face, but instead of the excited, the spoon only seemed to register when it was almost in contact with his lips, and there was no curiosity, no movement, no spark. For most babies, mealtime is a dynamic engagement that goes by like background noise. Fearsome fans flocked to the video's comments section after it touched a nerve, with some suggesting a connection between Christine's history of substance abuse and the child's development. One of the caustic remarks made during pregnancy that reflected the feeling that many others were beginning to have was, "Chrisean Rock is in denial." These started pouring in, but Christine wasn't having it, was another. "Junior isn't reaching his goals. He can't even hold his head up. He doesn't smile and he doesn't cook," she retorted, labeling the worries as hateful and claiming that they were the result of online trolls attempting to respond to her. To many bystanders, it was just noise. As the public discourse grew, the narrative started to change, with a growing chorus of voices worried that something important was being missed and that an innocent child might have to pay the price of denial. Some speculated that the issue might not be about Christine's choices during her pregnancy, but rather something genetic that could not have been prevented by any amount of planning or prevention. And so a new kind of empathy, based on understanding and support rather than guilt, was born. Some objected vehemently, saying that the developmental milestones that were being mentioned all the time were merely arbitrary markers to make parents feel proud rather than reflecting a child's real progress. But that argument quickly falls. It may be emotionally satisfying to watch your child reach a milestone, but it's not the time to boast. Being an informed parent requires a constant balancing act between information and intuition, and these benchmarks are helpful guides designed to help caregivers spot possible issues so they can take timely, appropriate action. Meanwhile, online, medical experts who examined publicly uploaded images and videos painted a much more bleak picture, with some medical experts pointing to specific physical indicators that were consistent with fetal alcohol syndrome, implying that what many were terrified of might be a diagnosable fact rather than merely a suspicion. The controversy surrounding Chrisean Rock and her child has intensified, not out of harshness, but rather out of unavoidable concern. She said her son was perfect when she gave birth to him on Instagram Live, but as time went on, viewers noticed concerning symptoms. His head remained motionless, his hands didn't move with him, and his cry was harsh, and his lack of excitement, reaching and curiosity in the spoon stood out. To him, it barely registered. People started to make connections between the small telltale signs, which included a flattened midface, huge ears, a markedly small head, and narrow eyes with epicanthal folds, all of which resembled the physical symptoms of fetal alcohol syndrome. The video that surfaced showed her feeding her 8-month-old, and it sounded more like an animal's scream than a baby's sobbing for comfort. His pupils also had a white reflection in family portraits, which could be a sign of vision problems, and some even claimed to hear a cat-like cry, which prompted them to speculate about conditions like Cri-du-chat syndrome or potential withdrawal symptoms in newborns. Chrisean resisted all of this, pleading with critics to stop diagnosing her child with screens. "He's healthy, bro," she said, casually dismissing what others saw as warning signs. As the months went by, the silence about missed developmental milestones and medical updates became deafening. Although Chrisean had previously been open and honest, sharing every little moment from early morning cuddles to late-night bottle feedings, letting followers watch her become a mother in real time, many people's concerns felt urgent, like a call for someone to actually look at this child. There were gaps that shouted louder than the carefully staged moments when Blueface entered the fray. There were no films of the checkup or of Junior babbling, crawling, or pointing. Despite his own shortcomings as a father, Blueface publicly accused Chrisean of neglect, claiming that she was solely responsible for the holdup in their son's necessary hernia surgery and that it had nothing to do with medical advice. Priorities. As soon as he was publicly humiliated, she proudly shared Junior's recovery in an attempt to deflect the conversation. But by that time, trust had already started to erode. Chrisean posted a video of Junior trying to walk as his first birthday drew near, ostensibly to demonstrate that he was growing normally. But it backfired because, at almost a year old, he was still not walking on his own and showed no signs of verbal engagement, baby talk, gestures, or interactive response to Chrisean's understanding of the seriousness of motherhood and raising a child, especially one who would require special attention, was also at risk. So the video did more than ease concerns about developmental delays. Some people expressed what they had long suspected. Perhaps this child wasn't born out of love or readiness, but rather as a way to maintain a failing relationship. It requires more than public affection and sporadic posts. It requires perseverance, determination, and the capacity to handle difficult circumstances. "You can't help someone who doesn't see the problem," said Chrisean's longtime friend Jiden, echoing the annoyance of those who looked on helplessly from the sidelines. Chrisean appeared to be more concerned with the outward appearance of motherhood than its responsibilities, and she eventually started to withdraw from the spotlight and share less about her son. Viewers were more offended by the impression that he was the victim of two people who were so consumed with their own drama that they never took the time to prepare for it than by what they saw when she took Junior to church for the debut of her new song, Yahweh. Junior was about 2 years old, and instead of being curious or acting like an ordinary toddler, he sat quietly disinterested. Chrisean's response, or lack thereof, infuriated the public. But so did Blueface's mother, Clarissa, who had always been outspoken in her disdain, even though her criticisms frequently sounded harsh. The pregnancy had been tumultuous from the beginning, with threats to end it and substance abuse that persisted despite warnings, and now there seemed to be little accountability for the possible impact of those choices on the unborn child. What began as an online drama has evolved into something heavier, a very real, very human situation involving a child who may need more care, attention, and protection than he's currently receiving. The focus is no longer on celebrity spectacle, but rather on a child's future, and whether or not those closest to him are ready to assume that responsibility. She once admitted, through tears, that seeing her grandson for the first time devastated her. There is a child, just a little boy, caught in the middle of a life he didn't choose. But beneath the headlines, beneath the drama, Clarissa's unvarnished and painful honesty cut through the noise that has surrounded this story from the beginning, despite the complexity of her relationship with Chrisean. She made it clear that she loves all of her grandchildren no matter what obstacles they face. As the cracks begin to reveal, the public is not looking for perfection, but rather for authenticity. A mother who is prepared to face hard realities, own her mistakes, and prioritize her child because perfection was never the point. Chrisean continues to project a carefree image, smiling for cameras, partying, and drinking as if nothing had consequences. The signs are too clear to ignore: the distant look, the strange cry, and the lack of speech or emotional response. Even those who once supported Chrisean are beginning to realize the terrible reality. People aren't being cruel by observing that, just human, but they're concerned, and rightfully so, because what's happening doesn't seem like a child just developing at their normal pace. At his own pace, it seems like a child might be coping with the consequences of decisions made before he even breathed, and those aren't just theories. They're supported by unmistakable, uncontested evidence. A number of clips, some of which were aired by the Zeus network itself, show Chrisean smoking while pregnant and laughing casually on camera, as if he is unaware of the possible repercussions of that choice. These videos weren't secretly recorded or staged by critics. People aren't acting hatefully or maliciously when they start to express concerns about potential developmental disorders. Rather, they're coming from the truth, not lies spread in comment sections or unfounded rumors meant to discredit her. And these facts were captured in real time and are now emerging as people try to figure out what might be causing her child's delayed development. Chrisean's son is nearly 20 months old, which is when most toddlers are not only walking, but also forming words, pointing, laughing, and interacting with their surroundings in obvious emotional ways. Many toddlers can also wave goodbye, communicate needs, imitate adult behaviors, and demonstrate social awareness at this age. But based on multiple accounts and publicly shared videos, Chrisean's, while it's true that every child develops differently, there are established developmental benchmarks for a reason, as tools for early detection, not to embarrass parents. And when those milestones aren't met, it doesn't mean a child isn't developing normally. Son has shown very little communication, no babbling, no attempts at speech, no overt signs of social interaction, and still no independent walking. The most tragic aspect is the growing sense that these warning signs are being minimized or ignored. And the more Chriseans continue to be silent or evasive, especially after being so outspoken in the past, the more they harm not only the child, but also the millions of parents who rely on them to speak up for their children's future and health. It is not about Chrisean's choices anymore. It's about a child who might be struggling in ways he can't express. And if those cries don't reach those quiet stares and those missed milestones, people are looking for someone who can face reality, take responsibility, and ask for help when needed, not for the perfect mother. The more that silence reads as confirmation about every aspect of motherhood, the more it has sparked deeper concern. Remain unanswered. The consequences could extend far beyond social media, because the issue isn't one of image, but rather of a child's future. What's more challenging is that Chriseans, who used to be so eager to post about every moment of motherhood on social media, now actively avoid the topic, and many people believe that she knows deep down that something is wrong and that the comments hurt because they touch on a truth she hasn't been ready to face. Though faith can be strong, it cannot replace responsibility for action. Hope without action is dangerous, especially when a child's future is at stake. It is not brave to hope that things will work themselves out without asking for help or answers. It is a gamble, and a child, not a timeline or aesthetic, may suffer the consequences. She makes vague statements and primarily relies on faith and superficial optimism. Motherhood isn't a performance, it's a lifelong commitment. And if there's one reality to this situation, it's that she's dealing with postpartum depression, fear, loneliness, shame, and the harshest spotlight possible, where every mistake is magnified and every vulnerability exposed. It's possible that she's paralyzed by the weight of what's happening. And no, that doesn't excuse inaction, but it does call for compassion alongside accountability. Makes it painfully clear that a child needs a mother who is attentive, learns, and leads with love, not a perfect one. Especially in the most trying moments,